Dr. Alex Carter sat at his desk, engrossed in equations that hinted at the possibility of time travel. After years of searching, he uncovered a startling anomaly on his screen, an indication that time had been altered. His heart raced as he realized that this wasn't just theory anymore, it was real. But as the data processed, a chilling thought crossed his mind. He wasn't the first to find this secret. Someone had come before him, leaving behind traces of a discovery that could change everything. As Dr. Carter sat there, the weight of his discovery hung heavy in the air. Time travel. An idea that had only ever existed in fiction was now staring him in the face. But he wasn't the only one who had stumbled upon it. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone else had already walked this path before him, maybe even decades ago. His mind raced with questions. Who had been here first? Was it possible that the answers were hidden in the past? The idea seemed almost too improbable to consider, yet the data in front of him suggested otherwise. He glanced around his lab again, half expecting someone to step out from the shadows to tell him that this was all a mistake. But no one appeared. The silence was deafening. Then, a sudden knock at the door broke his thoughts. It was Eve Lawson, an old acquaintance who had always been more interested in mysteries than science. "Dr. Carter," she said, stepping into the lab, "I think you're looking in the wrong place. What you're after is more dangerous than you realize." Dr. Carter didn't move as Eve stepped into the lab, her presence a stark contrast to the quiet that had enveloped him moments before. He had been so absorbed in the data that he hadn't noticed the time passing, yet here she was, interrupting his thoughts with the weight of her words. "What do you mean, dangerous?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eve took a deep breath, her gaze steady and unblinking. "You've touched something that was never meant to be discovered. Time is a force that shouldn't be tampered with." She stepped further into the room, crossing the threshold between caution and urgency. Dr. Carter frowned, his fingers still hovering above the keyboard as he absorbed her warning. "But what if the discovery is real? What if we could actually control time?" he asked, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice. Eve's eyes darkened. "Control time? You're already on the edge of something bigger than you think. People who have searched for the truth you're seeking, they vanish. No one comes back." Her words hung in the air like a dark omen, but Dr. Carter couldn't shake the feeling that the answers she feared were the ones he was meant to find. "I'm not backing down now," he said, his voice filled with determination. Eve sighed, a mixture of concern and resignation. "Then you need to know the truth. Time travel's already happened, and whoever is hiding it will stop at nothing to make sure you never uncover it." Dr. Carter stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor as he turned to face Eve. "You're saying this has happened before? That time travel isn't just a theory?" His mind struggled to comprehend what Eve was suggesting. Eve nodded solemnly, crossing her arms. "Yes, the signs are everywhere if you know where to look. It's hidden, buried in history. People who tried to expose it have been silenced, erased. Whoever controls this secret has the power to rewrite history itself." Dr. Carter felt a cold shiver crawl down his spine. The implications of her words were staggering. If time travel had already occurred, who was behind it? What was their goal? But why? Why would anyone keep something like this hidden? He asked, his voice shaky with the weight of his curiosity. Eve looked around the lab, her eyes scanning the walls, the papers, the equipment. The people who know the truth aren't just trying to protect it. They're using it to manipulate the past, the present, the future. They have agendas you can't even begin to fathom. Dr. Carter's thoughts whirled. The rush of adrenaline from his earlier discovery began to fade, replaced by a creeping sense of fear. "What do I do now?" he asked. Eve's eyes softened, but there was no relief in her gaze. "You stop digging, before it's too late." But Dr. Carter's determination had already set in. He wasn't backing down. Not now. Not when he was so close. "No," he replied. "I'm going to find out who's behind this. I'm not stopping until I have the answers." Eve's warning echoed in Dr. Carter's mind as he sat back down at his desk, his hands once again moving over the keyboard. She had told him to stop, but that only fueled his resolve. This was bigger than anything he'd ever worked on before. The truth was within his grasp, and he couldn't let fear or caution stand in his way. The data on the screen now seemed clearer, more urgent, as if it were calling to him. The coordinates were precise, the anomaly undeniable. Someone had left these clues for him, whether intentionally or not. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, as if time itself were conspiring to reveal its deepest secret. As he typed in the final set of numbers, the screen flickered again, but this time something different happened. A map appeared, a detailed blueprint, unlike anything he had ever seen. Dr. Carter stared at it, his pulse quickening. The map didn't just show coordinates. It showed places, events, moments in time, key locations where time travel had occurred. And it was all connected. As the map loaded, the screen began to glitch, the edges flickering like static. But it didn't matter. The discovery was too big to ignore. He was on the verge of something groundbreaking. His fingers hovered over the final key. Just one more step, and the truth would be his. Dr. Alex Carter stood before the entrance to the secluded mansion, the late evening fog rolling across the cobbled streets. His heart raced with anticipation and dread. The mysterious figure, Dr. Michael Hawke, had invited him here under the guise of offering answers. But Dr. Carter wasn't sure what kind of truth he would find behind these walls. His mind buzzed with the cryptic warnings Eve had given him, but he couldn't shake the pull of his obsession. This wasn't just about time travel anymore. It was about control. About power. As the heavy wooden door creaked open, Dr. Carter was greeted by a dimly lit hallway, the faint sound of a grandfather clock ticking in the distance. Hawke was waiting at the end of the hall, his face illuminated only by a low-hanging chandelier. "Dr. Carter," Hawke's voice echoed softly, like a whispered invitation. "I've been expecting you." The words sent a shiver down Dr. Carter's spine, but his curiosity pushed him forward. The door shut behind him with a soft thud, sealing him into the dark, oppressive silence of the mansion. It felt as if time itself had stopped the moment he crossed the threshold. Dr. Carter followed Hawke down the dim corridor, the floorboards creaking under their weight. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. "You must understand, Dr. Carter," Hawke began, his voice calm, almost patronizing. "Time travel is not a game." Dr. Carter's steps slowed as they approached a large wooden door at the end of the hall. Hawke turned to him, his eyes dark and unreadable. "It is an art, a power that must be controlled." Dr. Carter narrowed his eyes. "Controlled by whom?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with underlying tension. Hawke smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "By those who understand the consequences of altering time. Those who have the means to ensure the future is preserved." The door swung open, revealing a lavish study lined with bookshelves and old maps. The air smelled of dust and aged paper. As they stepped inside, Dr. Carter noticed several artifacts on display, each one more bizarre than the last. "This is where it all begins," Hawke continued, "but it comes at a cost, and you must decide whether you are prepared to pay it." The weight of the words settled heavily in the room, and Dr. Carter's curiosity shifted into something darker. Inside the study, the dim lighting only seemed to enhance the shadows, giving the room a sense of foreboding. Dr. Carter approached a display case filled with what looked like ancient artifacts, an hourglass, an old pocket watch, and a strange device he couldn't quite identify. "These," Hawke said, his voice low and measured, "are remnants of time travelers, objects that have transcended their original moments. Each one has been carefully preserved to protect the fabric of time." Dr. Carter leaned closer to the glass case, his breath fogging up the display. "So what is this really about?" he asked, turning to face Hawke. "You want me to believe in all of this? To believe in time travel? To follow in the footsteps of those who have disappeared?" Hawke's expression darkened. "It's not about belief," he said, taking a step toward Dr. Carter. "It's about power, the power to control history." A sudden unease swept over Dr. Carter. Hawke's words rang too close to the warnings he had received earlier. "Why do I get the feeling that you're not telling me everything?" Dr. Carter said, his voice tense. Hawk's lips curled into a slight smile. Because the truth is a dangerous thing to seek, Dr. Carter. Some truths are meant to stay hidden. Dr. Carter paced back and forth in the study, the weight of Hawk's words settling on him. So you're saying there's a group, a secret society, that controls time travel? He asked, his voice rising in disbelief. Hawk watched him calmly. It's not a group, Dr. Carter. It's a lineage, a responsibility passed down through generations. Dr. Carter stopped pacing and faced Hawk. Why haven't they told the world? Why keep it hidden? He demanded. Hawk's gaze hardened. Because the world isn't ready. Humanity cannot handle the chaos of knowing that time can be altered. People like you, curious minds, driven by the need for truth, you are the greatest threat. Dr. Carter felt his stomach drop. You want me to stop, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You want me to walk away? Hawk shook his head. No, Dr. Carter. You must make the choice yourself. The truth is dangerous. It will consume you if you let it. A cold shiver ran down Dr. Carter's spine, but his determination only grew stronger. He wasn't walking away. Not now. Not after everything he had learned. I'm not afraid, he said firmly, his eyes locking with Hawk's. I'm going to find the truth, no matter what it costs. The tension between Dr. Carter and Hawk hung thick in the air as they stood facing each other. Dr. Carter could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, but there was no turning back now. He had already crossed a line. The discovery of time travel, the artifacts, and Hawk's cryptic words had led him to this moment. The truth was within reach, but at what cost? What happens now? Dr. Carter asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. Hawk smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. Now, Dr. Carter, you have a choice. You can walk away, leaving the past undisturbed, or you can follow the trail, knowing that there is no turning back. Dr. Carter clenched his fists, his mind racing with the possibilities. He couldn't let go of this. Not now. Not after everything he had seen. I'm not walking away, he said, his voice firm. I'm going to finish this, whatever it takes. Hawk's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold calculation. Very well, he said. Then you have made your choice. With that he turned and led Dr. Carter deeper into the mansion toward the next step of the journey, a journey that would change everything. Dr. Carter had barely stepped out of Hawk's study when he was hit with the full weight of the betrayal. He had trusted Sophia Green, but the moment he stepped into the dark alley he saw it clearly. She wasn't just a colleague. She was playing him. The cold air bit at his skin as he stood there, unable to shake the feeling that everything had been a setup. He replayed their conversations in his mind, the way she had slipped crucial pieces of information, leaving just enough to push him forward, but not enough to warn him. Suddenly, the shadows seemed to shift, and Sophia stepped into the alley from the darkness, her eyes reflecting the dim streetlight. I didn't think you'd figure it out so soon, she said, her voice calm, almost amused. Dr. Carter's heart pounded as he processed the revelation. You're working with them, he whispered, barely able to get the words out. Sophia nodded slowly. I've always been, but you didn't want to listen. You wanted the truth, Dr. Carter. But the truth comes with a price. Her words hit him like a punch. She had been leading him straight into the hands of those who would stop at nothing to keep time travel hidden. As he took a step back, she smiled, almost pityingly. I thought you were different, she said. But in the end, you're just like the others. Sophia stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the wet pavement. You're in over your head, Dr. Carter, she said, her voice cool but tinged with a hint of something darker. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Dr. Carter stood his ground, refusing to show any sign of weakness. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. You've been manipulating me from the start, he replied, his voice steady, though anger flickered in his eyes. Sophia's lips twisted into a smile. It's not manipulation. It's about survival. You wanted to uncover time travel, but some secrets are too dangerous to reveal. She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. The organization I work for, they don't just control time. They control the future, and they'll do anything to keep it that way. Dr. Carter's mind raced. The pieces were falling into place, but the more he understood, the more dangerous it became. "You think I'll just walk away?" he asked, his voice low and almost incredulous. Sophia's eyes darkened, and for the first time, Dr. Carter saw a flicker of something raw behind her carefully controlled expression. "You don't have a choice. You're already in too deep. You should have stopped when you had the chance." With that, she turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Dr. Carter standing there, the weight of her words sinking in like a stone in his chest. The following days passed in a blur for Dr. Carter. The betrayal of Sophia haunted him, but the discovery that time travel was more than just a theory, the realization that it could be weaponized, consumed him. He began to dig deeper, studying every lead he could find. His search led him to a hidden facility, far from the city, surrounded by dense trees and an unnerving silence. Dr. Carter's heart raced as he approached the entrance, the cold wind biting at his face. Inside, he found the remains of a past experiment, papers, diagrams, and a faded journal belonging to one of the original researchers who had disappeared. As he flipped through the pages, the text became clearer. The experiments hadn't just been about time travel. They were trying to manipulate history itself, to rewrite key events for a select few. The realization hit Dr. Carter like a thunderclap. This wasn't about controlling time, it was about controlling reality. But who were the people behind it? And what would they do to keep their secret hidden? The journal contained a warning, one that Dr. Carter couldn't ignore. Once you step into the timeline, it doesn't let you go. Dr. Carter felt the weight of the journal in his hands, the pages old and fragile. As he read the final entries, the sense of urgency grew. The warning was clear, but the implications were staggering. He could feel the pull of the mystery, the temptation to uncover more. But he knew now that there was no going back. The deeper he dug, the more dangerous it became. He thought of Eve Lawson's warnings, of Hogg's cryptic messages. But now, none of it seemed enough to stop him. Time travel was real, and someone had already figured out how to manipulate it. Dr. Carter's thoughts turned to Sophia, and the chilling realization that she had been right. He was already in too deep. But as he closed the journal, a new sense of clarity washed over him. There was no turning back, but he had to know the truth, no matter the cost. He stood up, his resolve harder than steel. The answers were out there, hidden within the past, and he was going to find them. He stepped toward the door, knowing that once he crossed the threshold, there was no return. Dr. Carter arrived back at his lab, his mind still reeling from what he had uncovered. The journal had led him to this point, but there was still one final piece he needed. He began working feverishly, connecting the dots between the journal's cryptic messages and the anomaly he had found weeks before. As the data began to align, a map of time itself began to form before his eyes, routes, pathways, and key moments in history that had been altered. The question now was how. How had they done it? And more importantly, who were they? Dr. Carter's fingers flew across the keyboard, entering new coordinates, tweaking variables. The screen flashed once, then twice. And then, everything stopped. The map faded away, leaving only one thing behind. A single glowing red point on the screen. The coordinates. The place where the truth was hidden. "This is it," Dr. Carter muttered to himself. "I've found it." But as he stared at the coordinates, the weight of his discovery hit him. There was no turning back now. The secret of time travel, and the people who had kept it hidden, was just a step away. Dr. Carter stared at the coordinates on his screen, feeling the weight of the discovery settle over him. The location was in the middle of nowhere, an isolated area deep in the mountains. His hands trembled as he realized the true cost of his search. Time travel wasn't just an invention. It was a weapon. He had been chasing shadows, but now the truth was clear. Whoever controlled this secret had the power to reshape the future. He thought of all the people who had disappeared, the researchers, the missing figures, and even Sophia. They hadn't vanished. They had been erased. "This is bigger than I ever imagined," Dr. Carter whispered to himself. "And I'm not the only one looking for it." He prepared to set out for the coordinates, knowing full well the dangers awaiting him. As the map on the screen zoomed in on the location, the sense of urgency intensified. There was no more time to waste. The answers were out there, but so were the people determined to stop him from finding them. He couldn't turn back now. The journey was long, and the path to the coordinates was treacherous. Dr. Carter trekked through the dense forest, the cold air biting at his skin, his breath visible in the frigid night. The mountains loomed ahead, dark and imposing. As he reached the base, he saw an old, abandoned structure hidden among the trees. The place looked forgotten, untouched by time, yet Dr. Carter felt an eerie presence about it. The building seemed out of place, almost unnatural in its stillness. He approached cautiously, every step crunching on the frost-covered ground. "This is where it all ends," he murmured, staring at the structure. "The answers, the truth, it's here." He took a deep breath, preparing himself for whatever was inside. But as he moved closer, a strange sound broke the silence. It was the unmistakable click of a lock. And then, the door slowly creaked open. Inside the building, Dr. Carter found remnants of a long-lost time travel project. Old computers, worn-out papers, and strange devices were scattered across dusty tables. The air was thick with the scent of decay, but beneath it all, there was a feeling of something hidden, waiting to be uncovered. Dr. Carter stepped forward, scanning the room with his flashlight. Suddenly, he found a set of journals, their covers torn and weathered. As he flipped through the pages, he uncovered sketches of time travel experiments, blueprints, formulas, and cryptic notes in faded ink. It was then that he realized the project had been abandoned, but not without reason. They had created something powerful, and someone had wanted to ensure it was never found again. "I'm getting too close," Dr. Carter muttered under his breath. But the pull of the mystery was too strong. He couldn't stop now. The answers were here, hidden in the ruins of a forgotten past. Dr. Carter sat at an old desk, the journals spread out before him. He read the final entry, and his heart sank. The project had gone too far. Too many lives had been affected. The experiments weren't just about time travel, they were about altering reality itself. The last entry was a warning. If you're reading this, it's already too late. The project has begun to unravel the fabric of time. The consequences will be disastrous. Dr. Carter sat back in his chair, the weight of the words crushing him. He hadn't just stumbled upon something extraordinary, he had uncovered a disaster waiting to happen. The timeline wasn't just being manipulated, it was being broken. The knowledge, the power, it had all been left behind, hidden away, but now he had found it. And with it came the terrifying truth: time wasn't just something that could be controlled. It was fragile, and the more you tampered with it, the more it fought back. Dr. Carter knew he had to stop this. But how? The solution was hidden in the very heart of the project. As Dr. Carter left the building, the reality of his situation hit him hard. He had the knowledge, the answers, but they came with a cost. The project had caused irreparable damage to time itself, and now the timeline was collapsing. He needed to act fast. He rushed back to his lab, the cold wind biting at his face as the snow picked up. Once inside, he immediately began working on a solution. But the more he searched, the more it became clear. There was no simple fix. The timeline had been fractured, and any attempt to repair it could lead to catastrophic consequences. He needed to make a choice: risk everything to fix the timeline, or let it unravel and face the unknown future. As he stared at the computer screen, the weight of the decision pressed down on him. The choices he made from this point on would determine the fate of the world. "There's no turning back," Dr. Carter muttered, his voice heavy with the burden of his discovery. Dr. Carter stood before the machine, a strange glowing contraption that hummed with power. It was the last piece of the puzzle, the final step in his desperate attempt to fix the fractured timeline. He had the knowledge, but the solution was not simple. The machine was designed to recalibrate the timeline, to reset the damage done, but at a cost. It could rewrite history, but there was no guarantee it would work, or that it would leave anything unchanged. Dr. Carter knew the risks. The stakes were higher than ever. The balance of the world, the fabric of time itself, rested in his hands. With a deep breath he approached the machine. If this works, he whispered to himself, everything will change. But if it fails, his thoughts trailed off, but the weight of the decision was heavy. He had one shot. It was now or never. The final countdown had begun, and the choice was his to make. As the machine powered up, Dr. Carter felt the air around him shift. The atmosphere grew thick, as though the very fabric of reality was beginning to warp. The machine emitted a low, vibrating hum that seemed to echo in his chest. He stepped closer, his mind racing. Was this the right decision? Would he be able to live with the consequences? I have to do this, he muttered under his breath. The machine flickered, a surge of energy coursing through the wires. His fingers hovered over the controls, but something inside him hesitated. The history of time, his life, was about to change, and there was no going back. This is the only way, he told himself, steeling his resolve. Without further hesitation, he pressed the button. The machine whirred to life, and the room was filled with blinding light. The countdown had begun. The light from the machine enveloped Dr. Carter, and he felt himself being pulled into the very core of the timeline. His body trembled as the world around him began to fracture, time itself distorting in ways he couldn't comprehend. He saw flashes, moments from the past, the present, and the future, blurring together. Faces he had seen before, events he had witnessed, and places he had visited, all intermingled in a dizzying whirlwind. For a brief moment, he felt as if he were losing control of himself, but then the machine's energy stabilized, and the distortion stopped. Dr. Carter gasped for air, his mind reeling. He had crossed a threshold, but what awaited him on the other side was still unknown. The timeline was resetting, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Something had changed. And now, he had to face the consequences. Dr. Carter stumbled forward, his mind still spinning from the temporal dislocation. The room around him slowly came into focus, but something felt off. The lab had changed. The machines were different, more advanced, and the walls seemed to shimmer with a strange, unfamiliar energy. His breath caught in his throat as he realized that the reset hadn't just affected time, it had altered the world around him. The timeline had been rewritten, but the reality he had returned to was no longer the one he knew. "This isn't right," he muttered, his voice filled with confusion. He searched the lab, his eyes scanning for any sign of his former reality. But there was nothing. The people, the events, everything had shifted. He had undone the damage, but in doing so, he had created an entirely new version of history. "What have I done?" he whispered, the weight of the realization crashing down on him. Time had been rewritten, but not in the way he had expected. Dr. Carter paced back and forth, trying to make sense of what had happened. The timeline was altered, but to what end? He had reset the course of history, yet now the consequences were more dire than he could have imagined. The future had been rewritten, and in doing so, the past had been erased. Everything he knew was now a fleeting memory, a shadow of what had once been. He thought of the people who had disappeared, the lives that had been changed, and the future he had tried to protect. "I've made a mistake," he whispered, but the words felt hollow. There was no going back now. He couldn't undo what he had done. All he could do was move forward and live with the consequences. Time had been altered, but the price of that alteration was more than he could bear. With a heavy heart, Dr. Carter turned toward the door, knowing that his journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. Dr. Carter stepped into the unfamiliar city, his heart pounding with the realization that he was in a version of the world that wasn't his own. The buildings were older, the technology different, and the people seemed unaware of the timeline shift. He moved quickly, trying to blend in, but the sense of alienation was overwhelming. His past life had vanished, replaced by this new reality. It wasn't just the physical world that had changed. He felt the loss of connections, of people he once knew, all erased from existence. The more he walked, the more he realized how much the timeline had unraveled. He was alone, and the consequences of his actions were still unfolding. Time travel hadn't just altered events, it had erased history. The world around him was now foreign, and he had no idea how to fix it. He had hoped to make things better, but now, everything was different. "What have I done?" he whispered, but no answer came. Dr. Carter found himself at a familiar street corner, but something was off. He had visited this place countless times in his original timeline, but now, it felt completely foreign. The coffee shop where he used to meet friends was gone, replaced by a rundown storefront. His thoughts raced as he walked toward the spot where the old building should have been. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything he had known was slipping away. He reached into his pocket for his phone, hoping to check the date, but when he pulled it out, the screen was completely different. An outdated model he didn't recognize. Panic surged through him. His past life, his identity, was it all erased? "No," he whispered to himself, "I need to fix this. I can't lose everything." The weight of his mistake was suffocating, but Dr. Carter couldn't stop now. He had to find a way to make it right, no matter the cost. As Dr. Carter continued through the altered city, he began to notice more discrepancies. Small things at first, like the names on buildings, or the faces of strangers who didn't seem to recognize him. It was as if his entire existence had been erased from history. The people around him moved in a world that no longer had any connection to his past. The thought made his stomach churn. He had altered something fundamental, and now the world was paying the price. He had come so close to uncovering the truth about time travel, but now he was stuck in a reality that wasn't his own. "What if I can never go back?" he wondered aloud. He didn't have the answers, but the one thing he knew for sure was that the timeline was broken. The world was fractured, and only he could put it back together. But how? Dr. Carter returned to his lab hoping to find a solution, but when he entered, the lab was not the same. The equipment was different, more advanced, and the data on the screens was unfamiliar. It was as if someone had altered the very foundation of his research. He had hoped that the answers would be here, but now, everything felt out of place. His once safe haven was now just another part of this fractured reality. "How do I fix this?" he muttered, pacing the room. The walls seemed to close in on him, the weight of his failure pressing down. The timeline had shifted, but this was not the world he had hoped to save. It was a twisted version of it, and Dr. Carter knew he was running out of time. With a sense of desperation, he started to examine the machines, looking for any way to reverse the damage he had done. Dr. Carter sat down at his desk, exhausted and overwhelmed. He had tried every possible solution, every theory, but nothing seemed to work. The timeline was broken beyond repair, and he was the only one who knew it. The world he had known was gone, replaced by this new, unfamiliar reality. As he sat there, the weight of his failure sank in. "I can't undo this," he whispered, his voice breaking. The damage was done, and there was no way to fix it. He had made a choice, to play with time, to try to fix the past, but now the consequences were irreversible. As the room grew darker, Dr. Carter realized that the future he had fought for no longer existed. He had broken the timeline, and now he was trapped in a reality that wasn't his own, with no way to return. Dr. Carter walks through a ruined city, the weight of his failure heavy on his shoulders. The altered world around him, with familiar faces but lost connections, reflects the irreversible damage he caused. "What have I done?" he whispers, realizing he can't undo the fracture in time. Dr. Carter recognizes the erased history, places and people now gone. As he stands before a former landmark now unrecognizable, he wonders if his efforts to fix the timeline were in vain. "I can't bring them back," he says, lost in his failure. Eve appears, revealing she had been part of the larger system manipulating time. Dr. Carter realizes he was just a pawn, and that altering the timeline was never meant to succeed. "You did this," he accuses, but Eve's reply is cold. "We all did." Dr. Carter, frustrated, refuses to accept the irreversible damage. Eve tells him the timeline is beyond repair, and he is too late. You can't fix it, she says, but Dr. Carter, determined, vows to find a way to undo the chaos. Dr. Carter, with renewed resolve, walks into the unknown, determined to make things right despite the fractured world. The journey for redemption continues, and he whispers, "I'll make it right," as the sun rises over the ruined city,